Welcome to the second episode of Cool Climate Wine Stories. My name is Jan Eggers. I am your host and also the organizer of the Cool Climate Wine Summit that happens next time in Copenhagen on January 19 and 20, 2025. In this episode, I would like to invite you to discover a specific grape variety with me that probably, like no other grape variety, is shaping the perception of people when it comes to Danish and Swedish wines, but also plays an important role in Poland, the Netherlands, and also by the German coastal regions of the Baltic Sea and the North Sea. I'm speaking of Solaris, a white grape variety that many people probably have tried or heard about. Some people really love it and really appreciate it. Some people are a little bit more skeptical. So in this episode, I would like to present you actually not only a little bit of background about Solaris, but also we were going to taste 4 different wines by 4 of our exhibitioners at the Cool Climate Wine Summit. Actually, one from Sweden, one from Denmark, one from Germany, and one from Poland. And we will have Solaris here in the glass in very different styles. We are going to start with a Danish sparkling wine, then we'll have a fairly lighter styled Solaris by a Polish producer, then go on with a barrique styled Solaris by a Swedish producer, and end with a dessert wine by a Rheinhessen producer from Germany, a Beerenauslese. So very exciting journey we are going to take here. And I would like to invite you to discover the world of Solaris together with me. If you find some topics like this especially interesting, then the Cool Climate Wine Summit in January in Copenhagen is definitely the place to be, because there will be many producers, not only from Germany. We have a big amount of German quality producers there, but we have also 5 very, very interesting Polish producers. We have some great producers from Sweden and about 10 Danish wineries joining us. So the Cool Climate Wine Summit is definitely a place to be in January to discover a lot of interesting cool climate wines. And now we have to understand, what are PIWI varieties? PIWI is short for pilzwiderstandsfähig, so a German term, which translates best to fungi or, let's say, disease resistant. Basically PIWIs are sort of the new crossings, and now I'm using a term that is very difficult to use because PIWIs are not crossings. They are technically seen hybrids, but I would first and foremost like to introduce you to the concept of crossings. Sometimes these processes happen totally natural. If we look at Cabernet Sauvignon, for example, very important, very famous red grape variety. Cabernet Sauvignon is the crossing result and the spontaneous crossing result originating at some point of time in Bordeaux of 2 grape varieties that we also know very well. On the one side, Cabernet Franc, a red wine variety, and on the other side, Sauvignon Blanc. So those 2 grape varieties at some point of time decided spontaneously in the field, okay, let's do a cross, and then Cabernet Sauvignon came out of it, and then after some rounds of mutations probably, we had some, let's say, very, very stable result of that could be cultivated around the world. And probably no human has been involved here. But we could, of course, also control this process and say in the laboratory, okay, let's take 2 grape varieties, let's cross them and create some new grape varieties with, so to say, different purposes in mind. Now, if we take 2 grape varieties that are part of the species Vitis vinifera, which basically could most easily translate it to the European grape varieties. If we think about the big ones, Riesling, Chardonnay, Merlot, Cabernet Sauvignon, Sauvignon Blanc, they all belong to the Vitis vinifera category. If we cross 2 Vitis vinifera species wines, then we get a new Vitis vinifera wine, and we call it for a crossing. This is not what PIWIs are. This is a big difference. So PIWIs, on the other side, usually have some kind of genetical relation to wines or varieties that are not belonging to the species of Vitis vinifera. So they might belong to, for example, Vitis amorensis, which is more like Asian varieties, or to Vitis labrusca, which is basically American varieties. And now the big question is, why do we create these PIWI varietals? Why do we try to create new varietals that have some either Asian or American genetic heritage? And the reason for this is simply to improve those grape varieties' resistance for certain diseases. And one thing here is, of course, that with our European varieties, Vitis vinifera, that basically have been cultivated over decades, if not centuries in some cases. Most important reason, basically, that you have to remember is that most of the common diseases that we are working with, be it mildew, for example, as a very good example, are coming from the US. So those have been imported over the last 150 years due to globalization, and there have been diseases that actually have been not known to Vitis vinifera before a certain point in time. And therefore, it makes, from a genetic perspective, totally sense that we say, okay, let's take some of our very common and popular Vitis vinifera varieties and let's cross them with some other varieties that have, let's say, a genetic heritage to or relation to Vitis amurensis or Vitis labrusca, to get some of those like American or Asian genes into the new varieties that then hopefully have a higher resistance against these diseases that we get from outside Europe. And this is the whole idea behind PIWI varietals. And basically, like, why do we do that? The idea is naturally that we try to reduce the amount of pesticides and the amounts of interventions per growing season that we need in order to protect our wines against these diseases. So this is where PIWIs are coming from. Now I hope you understood this concept. So they are not crossings, they are hybrids. They are usually based on classic European variety crossed with something that has genetic relation to Asian or American varieties in order to increase their protection against certain diseases that were imported to Europe and not have been naturally present in Europe before a certain time. So Solaris is a PIWI varietal of what we call the first generation. It goes back to 1975 and it basically goes back to a guy called Norbert Becker. Norbert Becker was first working in Geisenheim at the university there and then basically moving to the Rebschule Freiburg, Staatliches Weinbauinstitut Freiburg, which is, so to say, one of the leading European institutions when it comes to genetic analysis of grape varieties, to crossings and hybrids, creation of varieties, and general research about certain grape varieties. And Norbert Becker is, so to say, like one of the most important figures when it comes to hybrids in Germany, to PIWI varietals, very much like the common famous grape varieties go either back to Norbert Becker from Germany at Freiburg, or they go back to Norbert Blattner, who comes from Switzerland. And Norbert Becker is, so to say, what we consider the father of Solaris. This is not like totally true because there has been like some experimentation in Czech Republic before, which then was, so to say, transferred to Norbert Becker, but he was, so to say, the guy who made it or turned it into like a commercially feasible grape variety. It was then in 2001 licensed by the European Union as Vitis vinifera, actually, so categorized as a Vitis vinifera, and this is very important because this means it is, so to say, possible now to make commercial wines with it on a large scale. Otherwise, it would not be allowed in the European Union to use this grape variety for commercial wine production. Yeah, so it's a little bit like weird that we call it Vitis vinifera, although we clearly know it's a PIWI and we clearly know there are some relations to some Asian varieties. But let's quickly look where Solaris is genetically actually coming from. So as I said, it's a first generation PIWI varietal, and going one generation back and look at the parental varieties of Solaris, and we have on the one side Merzling, not a grape variety that is pretty much commonly known, but people who deal with PIWIs and people who deal with like crossings and hybrids, they know Merzling. And on the other hand, we have GM 6493, and this basically 6493, yeah, this is a number, a categorization number. GM usually stands for crossings or grape varieties used in Geisenheim projects, and basically this is then a grape variety that is not commonly used for wine production, but often only just like a crossing partner for creating new crossings or hybrids, so to say. And let's go now again one generation back, because it helps us very much to understand where Solaris is getting its aromatics from. Let's go to the Merzling side. So Merzling is a cross of three grape varieties, and now let's look first and foremost at the most important ones in there: Riesling and Pinot Gris. And then on the other hand, we have something that is called Sève Velard, which let's ignore that for now. It's not important. For me, the most important thing to refer to is Riesling is part of this grape variety. And this naturally, when we have Riesling in a grape variety, Riesling first and foremost a cool climate varietal, very popular naturally from Germany, where we have in a global scale very cool climate, and the Riesling really has proven that it can thrive as a white wine variety in many different contexts. So if we have Riesling, we on the one hand know we have probably a grape variety that is very suited for cool climates, and we have a grape variety that is highly aromatic. Quite simple. Then let's go on the other side. On the other side, we have this GM 6493. And 6493 is basically a cross of Severny, which is a Russian variety, cultivated in Russia or developed in Russia. And basically this already gives us a hint what kind of non-European genes are in this grape variety, because Severny has clear signs that Vitis amurensis, this species that is very dominant in the Asian wine countries, a wild grape variety there, has been used to create GM 6493. And then on the other hand, we have Muscat Ottonel. Yeah? And this basically explains again Muscat Ottonel, a Vitis vinifera variety, very popular one with a very highly aromatic profile, then again gives us an idea that we should expect from Solaris in the glass always to be highly aromatic, because we have some genetic hint to Riesling on the one side and then to Muscat Ottonel on the other side. But enough background information regarding Solaris. Let's taste some wines. I think that is a good starting point, and I would like to show you with the lineup here today the diversity and high quality that Solaris can deliver. We are starting with a sparkling wine, traditional method, but before diving into the wine itself, is it possible to make high-level sparkling wine of those varieties? And before we go to the Danish producer Guldbæk Wien, where I have an example here, I would like to give you one reference point that is kind of interesting to rethink that question. Because if you look at the most northern vineyard in Germany, which is located on the island of Sylt, allegedly, then they are growing Solaris there. And then there is a very famous German VDP producer, Balthasar Ress actually, from Rheingau, using those grape varieties to create a high-level sparkling wine. Based on traditional method, the Söl Ring Solaris Extra Brut, coming in a very nice, as you can see, like a metal box here, like a whiskey bottle. And it is kind of experience I can definitely recommend in itself. We are not tasting it here today, simply for the reason that Balthasar Ress is not part of the Cool Climate Wine Summit in 2025. Let's hope they come in 2026 and would like to present this wine. But as we only taste wines from our producers in this podcast, to feature the podcast topics, we are going to Denmark instead. And I want to introduce you to a sparkling wine by Guldbæk Vingård, which is located pretty much in the north. And if I say pretty much in the north, then I mean even for Danish standards, we are in the north. So we are on the island of Jutland, which basically is the main island of Denmark, the part of Denmark that is actually not an island, but a huge half island connected to Germany. And there, when we drive through Jutland, we come first to the city of Aarhus, Denmark's second largest city. And then a little bit further, we come to the city of Aalborg. And there, around about 20 minutes south of Aalborg, we find a small city called Guldbæk. And here we find Guldbæk Vingård, where Kim Trysse with his family is since 2008, let's say, improving their ambitions. Yeah. So like most Danish wine producers, they started at some point of time experimenting, planting some wines and planting some more, learning, getting some help. They got, for example, help from French and German winemakers to really like speed up their game. And today, Kim and his family are among, I would say, the absolute top producers that we have in Denmark. And therefore, I'm also like especially like grateful that he's joining us together with 9 other like high quality Danish wine producers at the Cool Climate Wine Summit. So today they have about 4 hectares and between 4 and 5 and 15,000 wines. So you can very quickly see they are somewhere around these 3,000 wines per hectare, which is of course a very, very low density of planting wines compared to like these massive areas like say in New Zealand where we have 10,000 wines per hectare naturally. And this basically tells us the story of Denmark. So at 56 degrees north, we have, especially in spring, but also like in autumn, the problem that the sun is so low, even like on the peak of day, that basically if the rows of wines would be closer to each other than they are, the shadow they are casting would actually really disturb the development phase of the grape. So we have to plant the rows of wines very far apart from each other in order to ensure that even with this very, very low degree of the sun in autumn, the ripening is not disturbed. So super interesting, like small terroir study, especially when we are in Denmark. We will do like a podcast about this a little bit later on. Like in Sweden, it's all about micro terroir. So for Kim, the situation at Guldbæk Vingård is that on the west side, They have this like massive like lake chain, the Limfjorden, which so to say gives a kind of moderating effect from the west side. And then on the right side, they have basically the Kattegat, which is this kind of connection of the Baltic Sea to the Atlantic Ocean. And this basically is a very, very narrow, like small little waterway, which basically also allows for some moderating effects from the right side. And yeah, let's dive into it. First and foremost, beautiful label. I think this is also like something that is really stunning for many of the Danish producers, the Swedish producers, the Polish producers. They have the big advantage that they do not have any, let's say, certifications around them, so to say, in terms of legislation of protected designated origins. I mean, naturally, let's say when you are a Chablis producer, you want to give the consumer all the necessary information on the bottle that your wine is from Chablis, so the consumer exactly knows what it is about. But those guys, they do not have these like sub-regions and protected designated origins yet. So there's no need to give the consumer like any more information on the label than a beautiful experience and maybe the name of the wine. So it's Primo 2022, the first 2022. Kim gives us the information, it's from Guldbæk Vingård, and it's the traditional method. So if we look at the back and the description, sparkling Solaris, it's all like handmade, hand harvested, traditional champagne method after the first fermentation at very low temperature. Then 12 months in the bottle afterwards for the second fermentation. It's brut. That's the information we get. And also what we get here, it's all organic. It's all organic. It's organic certified after Danish standards, after European standards. It's PIWI, 100% Solaris, of course. And this is naturally for me like a very interesting story. And I talked to Kim about it also on the phone. Last time he told me like after a terrible 2024 vintage, especially in Denmark, let's say everything they did not think possible in Denmark in terms of diseases and problems suddenly appeared in the 2024 vintage. And this a tiny bit was destroying, I think, this like idea perception that certain problems and diseases cannot affect us here in the Nordic climate, but they did. Especially as the autumn was way warmer and way sunnier than ever expected, and suddenly we have like totally different problems with the varieties that we have planted here than we have seen before. And Kim told me basically that he's really much looking forward to the summit because he has so many questions with his very like biodynamic take they have at the vineyard. They also have a lot of like fruit plantation and so on and so forth. So they really try to create this like working ecosystem there and do it on a minimum intervention way. And Kim told me basically that, yeah, he's really much looking forward to exchanging ideas with all the like biodynamic winemakers we have at the summit from Germany, because he has so many questions after this vineyard. There are so many question marks he wants to get solved. And this is also something that we really aim for, of course, bringing together like large German wineries with smaller Danish, Swedish, Polish wineries, getting like an active like exchange at the Kullabergs Wine Summit, so people can exchange ideas and support each other in their development. But yeah, let's have a look at the wine in the glass. So you see, clearly sparkling, definitely. Lovely color, actually. Yeah, very, very nice and pale. Yeah, lemon greenish in that regard. Highly aromatic, no doubt about that. I sometimes like really wondering about people who claim you cannot really make like sparkling wine based on highly aromatic varieties. Let's say Riesling is one highly aromatic variety we definitely know we can use for sparkling wines. We know it from Sekt in a massive scale. But then like Sauvignon Blanc, a lot of people like put doubts on Sauvignon Blanc and its capacity to create great sparkling wines. And I would actually argue that I had some amazing Sauvignon Blanc sparkling wines, and also like some from some related PIWI varietals based on Sauvignon Blanc. And also here in the glass is Solaris, based, again, as I explained in the beginning, genetically on Riesling and a little bit Muscat Ortonel, really shows here the highly aromatic profile of those grape varieties. It's very much on the greenish side, fresh, green apple, green pear. There's a very light and beautiful touch of the on the lees nose, like some butter brioche, some very lightly roasted, toast, so to say. Very fine bubbles, very delicate mouth-filling, foamy structure, very delightful acidity. Actually, you would expect, honestly, for like a wine coming from 56 degrees northern latitude, much more acidity in the mouth, much more freshness, but it integrates here very, very nicely, very smooth, nearly buttery in the aftertaste. Of course, the apple is coming out, the pear is coming out, but everything is turning a tiny bit more mature, going a little bit away from the total greenish touch of it, a little bit more towards the yellowish, yellow apple, yellow pear touch. Some sour peach coming out. Beautiful. Floral. Some hints of acacia honey. Some the sugar here is probably like somewhere around the, let's say, 9 to 10 grams per liter, I would guess, is really integrating nicely, really giving us a nice overall mouth-filling round perspective. So I think this is a really, really, really lovely example for wine, showcasing that Solaris not only has an amazing potential as a sparkling wine, but also definitely has in general potential for creating extremely high quality and delightful wines that definitely should be on your must-try list. Good, so after this introductional sparkling wine showing that Solaris as a highly aromatic grape variety definitely can produce sparkling wines on a very, very high level, let's go to the still white wines to begin with. And I want to introduce you to another of our exhibitioners from Poland, the largest Polish wine estate today, Winnica Turnau, their Solaris 2023. So it's Winnica, as I learned from a Polish contact. I always said Winnica. Yeah, of course you pronounce or you speak out like you read as you read, but it's Winnica Turnau, and Winnica Turnau is today driven on the 37 hectares they have in, let's say, northwest Poland is where they are located, not too far away from the city of Szczecin. And basically driven today by a family, a group of cousins and family members running this estate, developing this estate, started many years ago. Again, like most of the stories in Denmark, Sweden also start like with fruits and apples and orchards and so on and so forth. And at some point of time, there was the idea, oh, we have beneficial soil and microclimate here, let's try some wine, why not? So today, as the largest Polish estate with 37 hectares, a beautiful place for agri-tourism, simply visiting a Polish state-of-the-art vineyard. We have a bunch of other like great Polish vineyards joining us at the Cool Climate Wine Summit, and we will also like very soon launch an own episode just about Polish wine, because I think Polish wine is something very fascinating personally. I mean, naturally it's a cool climate wine growing region. It's a country that does not have a super long-standing history of winemaking, so really up and coming in my personal opinion, and there's a lot of super interesting stuff going on. But most people and wine consumers are, when you tell them about Polish wines, they're like, I did not know that Poland is doing any wines. So this is something that it's also like part of our mission at the Cool Climate Wine Summit, that we definitely want to change. We want to put Polish wines a little bit into international attention and give people like sommeliers, importers, distributors, but also you as a private consumer, if you like, to simply enjoy some Polish wines and get convinced by this amazing quality those estates actually can deliver today. It's a super, super interesting journey that we have there. So Winnica Turnau, located at about 53 degrees northern latitude, not too far away from the German border, not too far away from the city of Szczecin, produces mainly Solaris, Pinot Noir and Chardonnay, and this is something we definitely are going to taste in the podcast about Polish wines, because their Pinot Noir is simply an outstanding example of cool climate Pinot Noir. It's beautiful, but I would like to include them here today in this episode with the Solaris. And then they have like naturally like a lot of hybrid varieties, which is very typical, of course, for Poland, like it is also for Denmark and Sweden. So we find a lot of like interesting varieties in their portfolio, naturally something like Johanniter, for example, but also Hibernal, Seval, those Russian varieties that we talked about before. There is some Perlé, there is Cabernet Corty and Cabernet Cantor blends. So they have a wide variety of wines, and this is definitely something I urge you to try at some point of time if you can get your hands on their wines. But let's have a try of Solaris 2023 by Winnica Turnau. As you can see in the color already, naturally 3 degrees northern latitude and difference. So we should expect Poland to be a little bit warmer, so to say, than what we get out of the most northern part in Denmark. And I think we can see this immediately in the color. It is not as pale, not as like lemon greenish as was the sparkling wine by Guldbæk Vingård. Of course, it was a sparkling wine, so the grapes were harvested even less mature probably than what they were harvested at here at Winnica Turnau. But also in the nose, we immediately have a more, I would say, powerful and a more warm profile. So this is not so much like green apple and green pear. It is much more like quince, like mirabelle, like yellow plum nearly. It's yellow apple. It's very floral. It's very much more citrusy in a certain regard, like nearly like lemon zest to that extent, or let's say grapefruit even. So it has like this typical characteristics of a white wine being on the edge between feeling very acidic and feeling very mature in the nose. Yeah, this typical one where we are, it's not orchard, it's not tropical, so let's call it stone fruit. And then, so to say, more like on the sour side, on the more unripe side. Very beautiful complexity coming out of the nose, a lot of acacia honey actually, a light and sweet touch, but also what is very, very lovely about this wine, I did not read anything about oak, and I think it was fermented in stainless steel, but then they clearly say it was 5 months on the lease, so for the maturation process. And this is something that we also get very clearly in the nose immediately. It has some depth, it had some structure coming out in the nose already, some light toast touch or butter brioche touch. And then it's coming in the mouth with power, structure, oily, creamy, very nice sour peach coming out. Here's a quince coming out here, very floral, very nice acacia honey perspective. It has a 12.5% alcohol. Again, Polish wine, cool climate wine, but still 12.5 is a number. It shows also like clearly that Solaris is what we call for like an early ripening variety. So even in these cool climates, we get it really to a certain like amount of sugar. Actually, it's getting the 100 Öxle, or reaching the 100 Öxle threshold very early on in its like ripening season, and thereby naturally we can use it like for white wines that get power, that get substance, that get alcohol. I mean, this is still like absolutely dry wine. Let me have a look at the fact sheet. It's at its sugar of 7.1 grams per liter. So naturally, it is a dry wine, so to say, right? And this is kind of very lovely in this balance, having these fairly aromatic aromas in the nose, but having like a dry wine, but a wine with 12.5% alcohol, with a good body, with a good structure, thanks to the lees contact. In my opinion, this is a really beautiful example of what Solaris can be like if you give it a little bit of ideation, a little bit of creation, a little bit of substance thanks to the lees. Really, really nice take on it. Yeah, it's kind of definitely like also like a big recommendation to check out the Solaris by Winnica Turnau. Very lovely wine. So Kullabergs is located, if we look on a road map, let's start in Copenhagen where the summit is taking place. We take over the large bridge over the Sound to the city of Malmö, and then maybe about 1.5 to 2 hours north we come to like a small half island, very thin half island, like the same situation that we find in Denmark north of Copenhagen on the half island Sjællands, where we basically have a very long stretch thin half island, a little bit hilly, not mountainous, that's maybe like a little bit of an overstatement, but a bit hilly, and surrounded by water, which has this absolutely lovely moderating effect of that those half islands, despite we are very much up in the north, nearly always are frost free. And this of course is for like a northern winemaker an absolute dream situation. We are high north, we have water reflection of sunlight, we have maybe a little bit of a mild slope that we can put our wines on, and then naturally we don't have any frost thanks to this like protecting effect of the water bodies surrounding the half islands. This is a dream position terroir perspective to growing wines in the Nordic regions. And Kullabergs is located here with 17 hectares today, a very lovely modern winery, very nice Scandinavian design approach to building this winery. It's if you ever are in Sweden and you ever are in Malmö or in this area around, take the trip up there. Go to this winery, have a look, taste their wines. It's an eye opener for what Swedish wine can do, so to say. Actually, also again going back to what I talked to you about the Danish winery Guldbæk, the distance of the rows when planting this vineyard. So normal, many know that. Normal if we are in Germany, for example, in the Pfalz, on the Rheingau, depending on your approach as a winemaker, we talk of row distances of the rows of wines between 1.20 meter and maybe 2 meters max, 180 maybe. But here in Kullabergs, we have 3 meters distance between the single rows of wines, and this is really a wide distance for growing wines. Basically, this is again absolutely necessary because the sun is so low, especially in autumn, that the shadow that the wine rows would throw on the neighbors would totally interfere with maturing those grapes to a perfect state. And it shows really here in the glass how this is a very wise and clever decision, because we get a wine with an enormous level of maturity, nice acidity, nice structure, nice body. The flinty and edgy, definitely get it. It's very mineral, it's very thready, so to say, also like saline structured, really beautiful, complex. It's an amazing wine to try. I can definitely urge you to come to the Cool Climate Wine Summit and meet Felix and join his masterclass on Swedish wines and try this wine. This is an open invitation. So let's move on to wine number 3. And now we are going again a little bit more north. We go back to Scandinavia and we are going to Sweden. And yeah, right at the moment, actually, with the Great Swedish Wine Tasting only being like a couple of weeks in the past, it is very difficult to talk about Swedish wine without talking about this specific wine by Kullabergs, the Immelen. And yeah, let's give you a little bit of like background information. So Felix Åberg, who is the head winemaker at Kullabergs, also will be one of our speakers, introducing us to the beauty and variety of Swedish wines at the Cool Climate Wine Summit. And he's also like one of the people who put this like idea in the world of having a great Swedish wine tasting. And the whole idea here was together with some of his colleagues in the commercially oriented Swedish Wine Association, to create a tasting that is inspired by the Judgment of Paris, naturally, where they taste, let's say, the best Swedish wines in a blind tasting against big, well-known international wines. And here they invited a range of like top judges going through this blind tasting. Among them was Dr. Jamie Goode from the UK, who is also like another one of our speakers at the Cool Climate Wine Summit. And yeah, what happened in this tasting? First, surprisingly to many, Swedish wine won. Yeah, okay. So the best overall wine in this blind tasting has been the Swedish wine. And it actually has been Kullabergs Immelen. And this comes not really as a surprise, because it has been for a long time one of these like Swedish flagship wines. I just want to read up for you what Madeleine Stenvres, Master of Wine from Sweden, was writing about Immelen. She was saying, Immelen was a real eye-opener for me, a wine from the Nordics which makes a confident statement of what this emerging, seriously cool climate region is capable of, and where the sum is greater than its part. As much as its aromatic is driven with a pretty elderflower lift, it shows a lovely flinty edge which gives it a bit of attitude which harmonizes nicely with its textural qualities. A really clever wine. So that is basically what Madeleine Stenvres was writing about this wine. And I want to give you another review to just show how the international critics, the international experts perceive what Felix Åberg is doing here at Kullabergs. Jamie Goode was writing on wineanorak.com, and I'm linking to all those things in the show notes. He's saying about Kullabergs Vingård Immelen 2021. This is highly aromatic with sweet grape and Turkish delight notes, as well as some apricot and spice. The palate is dry and fruity with some exotic apricot notes, as well as a nice spice overlay. Tastes like a dry Sauterne, really delicious and rich, 92 out of 100 points. So With those, like, let's say, international remarks going into tasting this wine, we already can see two things. First and foremost, Swedish wine is definitely something that is on the edge of becoming internationally recognized as extremely high quality. And this is also something we want to showcase at the Cool Climate Wine Summit. And secondly, Solaris plays a massively important role in defining naturally the touch and the perception that we have about Swedish wine. So a well-made Solaris from Sweden is an absolute delight, and this wine is a very, very good example here. But let's taste the wine, the Immelen. It's kind of a lovely example, and we just said like about the wine from Winnica Turnau that we can see, okay, it's coming more like again from, let's say, a warmer climate, or it's basically like more mature than the one from Guldbæk in north of Denmark. But here, yeah, you can clearly see in the color already, like we very much go into the lemon color here. So we should expect maturity naturally. And something that strikes us immediately in the nose is oak. So actually, I would say new oak. There's a very nice buttery, creamy vanilla and malolactic hint. Vanilla, baking spice. There's definitely some, again, malolactic, full blown out, Parmesan cheese, some yogurt touch, some really lovely yellow apple, yellow pear, mature fruit, unripe pineapple, very peachy, definitely. Very structured, much more structured, that we here feel again that we are more on the north, because the acidity here is striking. Here, by the way, 13% alcohol. I would not have expected that, I must say. But it all goes together, like Madeleine Stenros says, a very, very clever wine. It all goes together in some kind of like unity. So the alcohol gives like an extreme body. We have some very lovely maturity here. Solaris really shows here its potential as a cool climate grape, especially grown in the right microclimate and the right terroir. And the acidity still is absolutely striking, which probably like speaks of very lovely day and night contrast that we have here. And it shows really here in the glass how this is a very wise and clever decision, because we get a wine with an enormous level of maturity, nice acidity, nice structure, nice body. The flinty and edgy, definitely get it. It's very mineral, it's very thready, so to say, also like saline structured, really beautiful, complex. It's an amazing wine to try. I can definitely urge you to come to the Cool Climate Wine Summit and meet Felix and join his masterclass on Swedish wines and try this wine. This is an open invitation. And now I would like to move on to the fourth producer, also an exhibitioner at the Cool Climate Wine Summit from Germany, Rheinhessen, the Bioweingut HEMA. HEMA is family-driven, more than 40 hectares in size. That's very typical for Rheinhessen producers. They are fairly large, despite being family-driven vineyards. It's here Andreas HEMA, together with his brother and his nephew, running the winery, creating, a wide portfolio of different styles of wines, from very lovely, easy, drinkable goods wine level to fairly high level like single vineyard wines, and then also like something like Solaris. So they are a member of Ecovine. We have a good amount of Ecovine producers at the Cool Climate Wine Summit. They work definitely after biodynamic principles to recreate the soil, to improve the soil. It was a kind of an eye-opener when we visited them like over summer, because they have this like lovely little winery, and then there are like a lot of like plots of land with wines around, and you go in, and then some of the parcels and some of the hectares are owned by HEMA, and some directly next to them by some like a neighboring vineyard that is exactly not working biodynamically. And if you stand in a vineyard and you look to the right side and you see somebody working after biodynamic principles, and you look on the left side and you see somebody working after conventional principles, and you look at the soil, then when I looked at HEMA, it was kind of very apparent in the eyes that you saw like 14 to 20 like different types of bugs, spiders, worms, and whatsoever within 20 seconds. And then you go to this like vineyard on the left that is like conventionally driven, and you don't see anything. It's just soil. You don't see any animals there. This is the kind of very interesting takes that I invite you to when you're ever in a vineyard at some point of time. go in and have a look, especially the contrast, biodynamic, non-biodynamic. It's kind of interesting to see what's happening just with the biodiversity in the soil itself. Yeah? So this is sums maybe a little bit up the philosophy of the HEMA estate for me. It's like typical Rheinhessen producer, big variety of grape varieties, from very easy, simple wines to fairly expensive single vineyard wines. But most important thing is they try to do things as clean as possible and as lovely as possible. Then let's move on to our last winemaker for today. So we showcase the beauty and diversity and the versatility of Solaris now, starting with a traditional method sparkling wine from Denmark, continuing with a steel tank driven Solaris wine, 5 months on the lease from Winnica, Turnau in Poland. And now we had the Immelen Solaris based blend, 85% at least Solaris from Sweden, with a good touch of oak maturation too, and a nice full complex body and 13% alcohol. And now I would like to move on to the fourth producer, also an exhibitioner at the Kullabergs Wine Summit from Germany, Rheinhessen, the Bioweingut HEMA. HEMA is family driven, more than 40 hectares in size. That's very typical for Rheinhessen producers. They are fairly large despite being family driven vineyards. It's here Andreas HEMA together with his brother and his nephew running the winery, creating a wide portfolio of different styles of wines, from very lovely, easy, drinkable goods wine level to fairly high level like single vineyard wines, and then also like something like Solaris. So they are a member of Ecovine. We have a good amount of Ecovine producers at the Kullabergs Wine Summit. They work definitely after biodynamic principles to recreate the soil, to improve the soil. It was a kind of an eye-opener when we visited them like over summer, because they have this like lovely little winery, and then there are like a lot of like plots of land with wines around, and you go in, and then some of the parcels and some of the hectares are owned by HEMA, and some directly next to them by some like a neighboring vineyard that is exactly not working biodynamically. And if you stand in a vineyard and you look to the right side and you see somebody working after biodynamic principles, and you look on the left side and you see somebody working after conventional principles, and you look at the soil, then when I looked at HEMA, it was kind of very apparent in the eye that you saw like 14 to 20 like different types of bugs, spiders, worms, and whatsoever within 20 seconds. And then you go to this like vineyard on the left that is like conventionally driven, and you don't see anything. It's just soil. You don't see any animals there. This is the kind of very interesting takes that I invite you to when you're ever in a vineyard at some point of time. Go in and have a look, especially the contrast, biodynamic, non-biodynamic. It's kind of interesting to see what's happening just with the biodiversity in the soil itself. Yeah? So this is sums maybe a little bit up the philosophy of the HEMA estate for me. It's like typical Rheinhessen producer, big variety of grape varieties, from very easy, simple wines to fairly expensive single vineyard wines. But most important thing is they try to do things as clean as possible and as lovely as possible. And when I asked Andreas, why have you started planting Solaris? And he told me basically, the idea was, of course, again, a sustainability idea. We wanted to have grape varieties like PIWI varietals that need less intervention in the vineyard, because less intervention in the vineyard, first and foremost, means more natural products, right, in the glass, and of course also less costs. But the initial idea they had was actually having here something that, so to say, you can produce fairly cheap and with minimum intervention, and then basically you can use it for Federweißer, for example, as a use case. But then they very quickly realized, oh my God, and this is what I told you before, very early on, Solaris reaches the 100 Oechsle point and then just shoots through if you have a very lovely warm summer like you usually have in Rheinhessen. And then they were like, okay, with this sugar potential and this still like intact acidity, let's try the third one. So they did here in, when was it actually, 2020, this Beerenauslese that I'm now pouring myself in the glass. And this is a kind of interesting to have a taste on, because I also like personally, I never had a dessert wine based on Solaris, but I know that a lot of winemakers in Denmark are, let's try this. It's probably the future. And they even think about botrytis affected dessert wines and so on and so forth. I don't know if this was actually botrytis affected. The fact sheet is not saying anything, and Hema also was not giving me like any ideas about it. But it's definitely interesting example. Just looking at the color, yeah, it's now not even like lemon. It's nearly getting this typical like golden dessert wine touch, which is very beautiful, with fairly lovely typical dessert wine aromatics, but also not too extreme. It definitely reminds of Solaris, so it's kind of interesting how a certain touch of like elderflower, of vegetal aromas, a little bit greenish, but also with green apple, green pear is still like in the underlying layer, then paired by dried peach, dried apricot in a certain regard, acacia honey, very nice oily creamy substance again, and also some chemical hints, so to say. Yeah, some maybe some bandage or some hospital connotation here in the nose. It definitely like in the nose feels already thick layered and like oily, and you expect already it is a dessert wine. It's probably syrupy, which it definitely is. Very nice, mouth-filling, liquid honey, green. I think it's very green to my extent, and highly aromatic, apple, quince, peach, very much peach, acacia honey, beautiful, 8% alcohol. So yeah, typical for a Beerenauslese, has something like 7 grams of acidity left, which also I think is pretty nicely paired with this like about 140 grams of sugar per liter. Really goes nicely together, gives a good overall experience. Very, very long, lovely finish. The peach is hanging there in the aftertaste, some petroleum notes, some nice hint of some chemical notes somehow. So beautiful example. The wine was made also like in a lovely advanced way. They used, for example, like 20 hours of maceration for the wine to give a little bit of extraction, to give a little bit of like power and density. I think you can also feel a tiny bit that there is like an underlying tannic structure here, not very predominant, but there is definitely some depth, there is some structure. Beautiful. Yeah, the quince, pineapple coming out here very nicely, good complexity. It's super interesting and super lovely example of that Solaris has an amazing dessert wine potential, and it's really just interesting to see what especially the Danish and the Swedish winemaker, if they find the right plots where the positive use of botrytis might be possible, what they will make out of this in the future. So this is also like something I'm looking really much forward about, to see the innovation with this grape variety, the development with this grape variety. Yeah, beautiful walkthrough here with 4 different types of wines. Thank you very much for being with me here today. And I hope that this showed you a tiny bit that Solaris is a grape variety that is definitely to be taken seriously, also with its future potential. It's a very versatile grape variety with many high quality producers that you can find in the classic cool climate growing regions, but even in Germany and traditional regions like Rheinhessen, it's really growing attention with its about 200 hectares that we have today in Germany. So it is a grape variety to have in the back of your mind. Try it when you get it, follow its development, definitely an open invitation. And then, remember the Cool Climate Wine Summit on 19th, 20th January in Copenhagen. Definitely will have a good amount of producers presenting the Solaris wines to an interested audience. So this being said, thank you very much for listening in and following until here. Great pleasure to have you. Again, feedback, comments, questions, put it in the comments, text an email, whatsoever. Remember to subscribe, always highly appreciated and motivating for us. And next week, I see you here with a special edition about 4 German sparkling wines, showing the diversity of German sparkling wines, all of them members of the Sektmacher. So I hope to see you next week for the 3rd episode of Cool Climate Wine Stories. Thank you for listening.